Today we're going to learn about graphing slope-intercept equations. The objective is I can graph in slope-intercept form. Okay, the form that slope-intercept is always y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Slope, as we've learned previously, is always rise over run, and the y-intercept is where our line will cross the y-axis. And if it's a linear equation, that will only occur once. One thing I like to tell my students is really we're only looking for two things. Number one, we're looking for where do I start? And number two, where do I go? Example number one, y equals 2/3 x minus 4. And you're going to need some graph paper for this. You can't eyeball it. You have to be very accurate when you're graphing linear equations. Okay, so the first thing I always determine is the y-intercept. That is the number without the variable, without the x. -4. I'm going to go ahead and find that on my graph. So from the origin, I go down 1, 2, 3, 4, and I make a dot. So that's my starting point. Okay, from that purple dot, now I'm going to determine the slope, which is the 2/3, which is my rise over run. From that purple dot down at -4, I'm going to rise 2 and run 3 and make another dot. And then I'm going to repeat this stair-step process over and over again. Rise 2, run 3. Sometimes I need to go backwards in order to get points on a graph. So I can also go back 3, which is -3, and down 2, which you'll notice from this left purple spot right, or excuse me, red spot right here, I'm also rising 2 and running 3 like I was before. So it's okay to go backwards. And now I just connect all those dots with a straight edge, and I have my equation, my line from this equation. Example 2, y equals -2x plus 3. Again, I determine my y-intercept. And I go up 1, 2, 3, and I make a purple dot. Now I determine my slope. Now, this is the only time we really enjoy fractions. Fractions make math, much more complicated, but when it comes to slope, fractions make life a lot easier. I need to know a rise, I need to know a run, so when I'm counting dots, I know where to go. So this time, I rise -2, which means I go down 2 and I run 1. When I run, my positive numbers are to the right, my negatives are to the left. And I'm going to repeat that stair-step pattern. Down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. And I can also go backwards. Okay? -1, back 1, up 2. So my rise would be +2 over -1, which is also -2, and that's okay. And then I connect my dots with a straight edge, and I put arrows on the ends to show that it goes on forever. Okay, example 3. 5/2 x. Now you'll notice this is a little bit different than the last two examples. There is no y-intercept. So a lot of students like to put in +0 because 0 represents nothingness. So this time my y-intercept is going to be at the origin. Go ahead and put a purple dot right in the middle of your xy axis. So I know where to start now, and then my slope tells me where I go. So I'm going to rise 5 and run 2 to the right. Now you'll notice if I did that again, I would pretty much be off the grid and almost off my graph paper. So I'm going to go backwards. Okay, I'm going to go down 5, -5, and back 2. And when I do that, -5 over -2 is the same as 5/2. So that's okay. And that will give me this point. And you'll notice the same stair-step pattern, up 5 over 2. And connect my dots. Okay, example 4. Now sometimes they give me a line and I need to come up with an equation. So here is the graph they give me. Now what I'm looking for is I'm looking for good tick marks. And what I mean by that is I'm looking for good grid points. For example, if I'm looking at the graph, this is not a good grid mark. That is not a good grid mark right there. It's close, but not good. This is not a good grid mark. Okay? So I'm looking for a spot where that line crosses, a perfect point here. And I always start off with y equals space. That's where my slope's going to go, x. And then over to the right, that's where my y-intercept's going to go. So I always find the y-intercept first. So you'll notice I cross the y-axis down here at -4. So on the right side of the x, I'm going to put -4. Now I'm going to find a good grid mark. And it looks like the best spot where my blue line crosses one of those intersections is at 3, 1 here. To the right 3 from the origin, up 1. And I'm going to go from the purple dot to the red dot using rise over run. I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to run 1, 2, 3. And my slope is 5/3. And that doesn't reduce, so there's my final answer. Example 5, same type of problem. So I always start off with y equals, I leave a space for my slope, there always has to be an x in the equation, and then my y-intercept will go on the right. So first, I look at the vertical axis or the y-axis, and I notice I put a purple dot here at +2. That's my y-intercept. So over here I put +2. The next good point over here looks like the point 3, 0. And now I do my stair step. So this time I go down 2. So my rise is -2, and I run 3. So my slope is -2/3.